Car dealership manager kicks out a simple man not knowing he's the new CEO. It was a crisp morning in the heart of Texas when he walked in quietly, without fanfare, just a man in worn jeans and a jacket faded by sun and time. His shoes bore the dust of long journeys, the kind that told stories without saying a word. He moved with unhurried grace, his gaze resting on each car with the admiration of someone who truly saw more than metal and paint. To him, these weren't just vehicles, they were pieces of engineering, stories of craftsmanship and power. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. Inside the glass-walled showroom of the prestigious Orion Auto Gallery, polished marble floors reflected not just the cars on display but the polished egos of those who sold them. Conversations paused. A few heads turned. A low murmur followed him as he strolled past gleaming sports cars and luxury SUVs. Whispers curled around him like cigarette smoke. Wrong address, one salesman muttered under his breath, nudging a colleague. He looks like he walked in from a bus stop, another sneered. But the man seemed immune to the noise around him. He walked with the stillness of someone unfazed, pausing before a sleek obsidian coupe. His hand rose, hovering for a second, then lightly touched the hood, fingertips grazing the polished surface as if to feel the heartbeat beneath. His lips curved into a faint smile, not of desire or greed, but of quiet reverence. From across the floor, Rick, the dealership's manager, spotted the figure. A man who built his career around reading credit scores by clothing choices. Rick saw only a disruption, someone who didn't fit the image he sold. He straightened his tie, adjusted the cuffs of his tailored shirt, and began his approach with the air of a man preparing to shoo a stray from a dinner party. "You lost, sir?" Rick's voice cut through the quiet hum of showroom ambience. The man turned slowly, eyes calm, smile unwavering. "No, just looking." Rick studied him. No watch. No visible brand names. Dust on his shoes. "We're not a museum," Rick replied sharply. "Everything here is for sale. Serious buyers only." There was no anger in the man's face, only a calm that made Rick slightly uneasy. "I understand," he said simply. Rick folded his arms. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable at a dealership downtown. They have used inventory. Affordable stuff." A few feet away, another salesman chuckled. Someone else tried not to smile. The man gave a small nod, the smile still lingering, undisturbed. "Appreciate your time." His voice held neither resentment nor sarcasm, just a kind of quiet grace. Then he turned and walked toward the glass doors, leaving no trail behind him but a strange silence. Behind him, Rick exhaled smugly, muttering something about wasting time. The showroom returned to its artificial rhythm, yet something hung in the air, unspoken, unsettled. A few employees exchanged glances. Outside, the man paused at the edge of the pavement, looking back at the building for just a moment. His expression held no bitterness, only thoughtfulness, as if he had seen everything he needed to see. And then he was gone. The hum of fluorescent lights and the soft purr of ambient music filled the showroom, but neither masked Rick's booming voice. He stood by the espresso machine, a fresh shot in one hand, pride in the other. A few employees gathered nearby, drawn less by interest and more by obligation. Rick thrived on their attention, feeding off their nervous energy like a predator sizing up prey. "Did you see that guy earlier?" he said, shaking his head with a smirk. Dust on his boots, coat looked like it came from a thrift bin. Probably thought he was in a used parts shop. He chuckled, loud and sharp. "I sent him packing. This place is for serious buyers, not for window shoppers who wandered in off the street." The team offered a round of forced laughs, a hollow chorus that echoed off the showroom's cold surfaces. No one dared break rhythm. Rick's approval meant survival here, commissions, shifts, job security. The wrong reaction could mean exile to the back lot or worse, a conversation behind closed doors. Derek, one of the senior salesmen, clapped Rick on the back. "You've got a radar for these types, boss. Always sniff them out." Rick raised his cup in mock salute. "It's what I do. This dealership has a reputation, luxury, exclusivity. We don't cheapen that by rolling out the red carpet for every random drifter." His words hung in the air, thick with arrogance. Over by the reception desk, Mia adjusted her headset, pretending to check the schedule. She was new, still learning the game, still unsure how much of herself she could afford to show. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her eyes flicked toward the lounge where the simple man had stood earlier, marveling at the coupe like it was art. She leaned toward Jordan, a colleague beside her. "He wasn't hurting anyone," she murmured. "He was just looking." Jordan's jaw tensed. He barely tilted his head toward her and whispered, "Don't say that too loud." Across the room, Rick's voice rose again. "People like that? They kill the vibe. Imagine some Real client walking in, someone with money, seeing that guy lingering around the Ferraris. It sends the wrong message." Another laugh, another round of nods. Yet beneath the surface, the atmosphere rippled with quiet tension. Eyes darted, smiles strained. Conversations died the moment Rick walked into earshot. Rick didn't notice, or perhaps he didn't care. He mistook silence for respect, compliance for admiration. As he sauntered past the row of desks, he offered unsolicited advice, corrected phone scripts, nitpicked desk arrangements. Even the way someone greeted a customer was open to critique. No detail escaped his attention, no moment missed for asserting control. "Keep the showroom clean. Keep the clientele cleaner," he barked without context. "If you don't know how to filter the crowd, you shouldn't be on this floor." Mia watched him retreat toward his office, his gait confident, almost triumphant. Her stomach tightened. Around her, phones rang and keyboards clicked, but the energy was off, stifled, mechanical. It was a place where instinct was overridden by survival, where kindness was mistaken for weakness. Later, during lunch in the break room, the air was quieter. Forks clinked against plastic containers. Nobody mentioned the man in the faded jacket, but he lingered in their minds. Mia sat beside Jordan again, hesitant. "Why does no one say anything?" she asked under her breath. Jordan didn't look up. "Because everyone's replaceable. Especially the ones who notice things." She nodded, her appetite gone. There was no room for empathy here, only performance. Rick had made that clear. Back on the showroom floor, Rick leaned over a new intern's shoulder, correcting a price quote. His expression never softened, even when he smiled. Every compliment dripped with the possibility of a catch. Every mistake, no matter how small, was a reflection of personal failure. The dealership gleamed under the lights, a palace of wealth and pretense. But beneath the shine was something brittle, an unspoken fear, a collective hush. Rick had built a culture where intimidation was disguised as leadership and exclusion masqueraded as brand protection. The man in the dusty shoes had left hours ago, but the footprint he made remained. Not on the floor, but in the silence that followed him. In the flicker of discomfort in Mia's eyes, the stiffness in Jordan's shoulders, the tightening grip of those who once believed this place was built on excellence. It wasn't excellence. It was ego. And one man's arrival had quietly revealed the cracks in the marble. Rick was halfway through a second espresso when his phone buzzed sharply against the polished desk. He glanced at the caller ID, regional office. His smirk widened as he picked up, leaning back in his chair with casual arrogance. "Rick speaking." A clipped voice answered, brisk and no nonsense. "Just a heads up. The new CEO is conducting unannounced visits this week. Low profile, no introductions. He's going incognito." Rick raised an eyebrow, more amused than alarmed. "The CEO? Playing dress up. Take it seriously," the voice warned. "He wants to see how branches really run. No staged greetings, no red carpets. Just business as usual. Be professional." "Always am," Rick replied with a chuckle, already reaching to end the call. "Trust me, I'll spot a CEO from a mile away." He hung up before the voice could respond, tossing the phone aside. "Some corporate stunt," he muttered. "Let's see how long that lasts." To him, it was just another pointless initiative from people who wore suits and sat behind glass walls all day. Across the city, however, those suits weren't sitting still. Inside the regional headquarters, the atmosphere was markedly different. Behind thick conference room doors, discussions hummed with intensity. Charts lined the walls, dotted with branch performance metrics, customer retention graphs, and employee turnover rates. A senior executive pointed to a cluster of underperforming locations, each marked by rising complaints and declining morale. "It's not the products. It's the people," she said firmly. "Some managers are strangling the culture. We're losing talent and loyalty." A hushed agreement circled the room. That's when a tall, quiet figure leaned forward, the new CEO, Jonathan Decker. No one spoke as he addressed the room. "We've heard the pitches. Now it's time to see the reality." His voice was calm but carried weight. "I'll be visiting branches myself. No names, no titles. If the culture's real, I'll feel it the moment I walk in. If it's broken, they'll show me without knowing they did." There were no further questions. Only nods. By the next morning, travel plans were in motion, disguises prepared. Suits were traded for plain shirts. Cars were parked blocks away instead of curbside. The mission was clear: observe without disrupting. Uncover truth beneath polish. Back at the dealership, Rick remained oblivious. The warning from Regional had long since left his mind, buried under a stack of sales targets and ego. He stood at the showroom's edge, watching his team with arms folded, eyes scanning like a hawk. The junior staff were hustling, yes, but never relaxed. Every conversation with a customer felt rehearsed, every smile calculated. Just the way Rick liked it. Precise, controlled, image perfect. Let the CEO walk in, he muttered. He'll see a well-oiled machine. But the machine wasn't running smoothly. Beneath the shiny exteriors, gears were grinding. Salespeople whispered about quotas they couldn't meet. Morale dipped with every barked correction. Kindness had no currency here, only results. And Rick, in his self-assured bubble, never noticed the fatigue in their eyes, or the fear behind their obedience. Somewhere not far away, a man in worn clothes stepped off a curb, adjusting his collar against the wind. His shoes were dusty, his hands still, his gaze clear. He was already on his way. Engines hummed low as a fleet of sleek black SUVs rolled into the dealership's private lot. The sudden arrival drew curious glances, followed by a scramble of activity. Jackets were straightened, counters wiped again, voices lowered to just the right tone. Every employee seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere, though no one said a word. Rick emerged from his office, adjusting his cuffs with practiced confidence. He flashed a wide, rehearsed smile as the doors swung open and the regional director stepped inside, flanked by two suited men and a quiet security detail. Their presence was subtle but unmistakable. Well, this is a surprise, Rick said, striding forward with arms open as if greeting old friends. To what do we owe the pleasure? The director didn't return the smile. His expression was unreadable, his voice calm but direct. Where's Mr. Decker? Rick blinked. Mr. Decker? The new CEO? The director clarified. Steady. He visited this branch earlier today. Said he wanted to get a feel for things without the usual fanfare. A silence followed. Short, but cutting. Rick's confident posture faltered. Nobody from corporate came through here today, he said. Slower now. At least, no one who identified themselves. Mia, standing off to the side, froze. Her thoughts raced back to the quiet man in the dusty shoes, the one who had smiled at the cars like they meant something more. She turned slightly toward Jordan, her voice barely above a breath. The simple man, she whispered. Jordan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Around them, the room seemed to shift, not in noise, but in weight. Realization fell over the staff like a sudden storm. The regional director watched Rick carefully. He told us he'd know the truth by how he was treated when no one recognized him. Rick opened his mouth, then closed it. His jaw tensed. The silence pressed deeper. I thought, he began, but there was no saving sentence. The moment he had dismissed the man in the faded jacket as unworthy, he'd written the ending to his own story. Every boast, every smug chuckle, every word dripping with condescension. They now echoed back with consequence. The staff didn't speak. They didn't have to. Their glances said enough. They had seen how Rick treated people. Now, someone important had seen it too. Rick's face lost its color. He didn't look like, he stopped himself, realizing too late that the excuse would only deepen the damage. The director turned to the rest of the staff, gaze moving from face to face. Not one person met Rick's eyes. Mia stared at the floor, heart pounding. He'll be back, the director said, more as a fact than a warning. And when he does, he won't be a stranger. Rick stood stiff, silent, his usual confidence replaced with unease. For the first time in a long while, he was unsure of his place. Outside, the last SUV idled for a moment before pulling away. The glass doors slowly closed, but the mood inside didn't settle. The room remained still, heavy with unfinished tension and the undeniable truth that everything had changed in an instant. Not with a grand speech. Not with an announcement. Just a quiet man, and the way he had been treated. The morning began like any other. Phones ringing, sales scripts rehearsed, glass gleaming beneath polished shoes. But beneath the surface of routine, tension pulsed like a silent drumbeat. The memory of the day before still lingered, thick in the air. Whispers had traveled quickly after the regional director's visit, each one pointing to the same conclusion. The man Rick had shooed away, the quiet stranger in worn clothes, was no ordinary customer. He was the one person none of them could afford to ignore. And then he returned. A black luxury sedan pulled up to the dealership entrance. The engine went still, and doors opened with a soft click. Out stepped the same man, though everything about him now seemed transformed. His walk held command, his presence undeniable. A charcoal-tailored suit framed him sharply, but it wasn't the clothes that shifted the room's energy. It was the certainty in his stride, the calm weight of someone who no longer needed to prove who he was. Mia was the first to recognize him, her breath catching in her throat. Jordan followed, his posture straightening with quiet awe. Conversations died mid-sentence. Movement slowed. All eyes turned. Rick emerged from his office, pale and unsure, a version of himself rarely seen. His voice cracked slightly as he hurried to greet the man. "Sir? Mr. Decker. I didn't realize." The CEO looked at him, not unkindly, but without warmth. His eyes were calm, steady. "You didn't need to know who I was," he said, voice quiet but firm. "You only needed to treat me like a human being." Rick opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Only a dry, awkward swallow. "I was testing the culture," Decker continued. "Not the numbers. Not the paintwork. The people." He looked around the room, his gaze passing over each staff member with quiet purpose. "And what I found was revealing." Rick shifted his weight, hands twitching at his sides. He had built his career on appearances, smiles when necessary, charm when convenient, but none of it seemed to work now. The usual tools had no use here. Decker turned away from him and stepped further into the room, his voice now lifted just enough to be heard by all. "Yesterday, I came here as no one important. I watched how I was received, how I was dismissed, and I saw something deeper than just poor service. I saw fear, hesitation, silence where there should have been respect." He paused. No one moved. "But I also saw restraint. I saw a few of you hold back from joining in, even when it would have been easy. That matters." His words landed heavily, but not cruelly. There was no shouting, no dramatic outburst, just truth, and the discomfort that came with it. Mia looked up, their eyes briefly meeting. Decker gave the faintest nod, an acknowledgement, a thank you. It was subtle, but she felt it. "I'm initiating a full review of branch leadership across the board," he said. "This place, like many others, will be evaluated not just by sales numbers, but by how people, customers, and employees are treated." A flicker of hope stirred in the room. Real hope, fragile but real. For once, it wasn't about who talked the loudest, but who listened the most. Rick stood off to the side, no longer the tallest presence in the room. He looked smaller somehow, his authority dimmed under the weight of consequence. Decker turned to leave but paused at the threshold. "Respect is not a transaction," he said, not looking back. "It's a reflection of who you are when there's nothing to gain." Then he walked out. No applause followed, no triumphant music. Just a lingering quiet, the kind that settles when something deep has shifted. The staff returned to their tasks, but nothing felt the same. For the first time in a long while, they moved with more than caution, they moved with purpose. Change had walked through their doors not with fanfare, but in silence, and it had spoken clearly. Rick sat stiffly in the sleek office chair, trying to mask the unease curling in his chest. Across from him sat Jonathan Decker, composed as ever, the regional director beside him. The silence was deliberate, heavy. No need for raised voices or theatrics. What was about to unfold didn't require it. A screen lit up. Footage played. Rick brushing off the man in dusty shoes, dismissing him with a smirk, muttering about riffraff to staff afterward. Audio clips followed, staff conversations, uncomfortable laughter, whispered comments that painted a picture far uglier than numbers ever could. Rick shifted in his seat. "With all due respect, I was maintaining the standard. We have a brand to uphold. Presentation matters." Decker didn't blink. "You believe protecting the brand means excluding people who don't look the part?" "I was preventing disruptions," Rick insisted, voice tight. "Our clients expect a certain—" "No," Decker interrupted, calm but final. "They expect respect, dignity, humanity." The room stilled. "You're not protecting the brand," he said. "You're the reason it's failing." Rick's arguments dried up. There was nothing else to say. A few moments later, he walked out of the office, his exit quiet, his title gone. Decker didn't linger. He stepped back onto the showroom floor, where tension still clung like dust in sunlight. His presence drew eyes, but not the way Rick's had. There was no fear in the glances now, only curiosity, and something cautious but emerging, trust. He approached Mia near the reception desk. "You spoke up," he said gently. "I didn't do much," she replied, uncertain. You didn't join in, he said. Sometimes restraint says more than resistance. She nodded slowly. He gestured toward the floor. What would you change? Caught off guard, she hesitated, then found her footing. Make this a place people feel welcome. Customers and staff. Training that teaches empathy, not just sales pressure. Let conversations start with listening, not qualifying wallets. Decker smiled, just slightly. Noted. Word spread quickly, Rick was out. But more importantly, something new was stepping in. A quiet shift began. Employees relaxed their shoulders. Eyes no longer darted over them with judgment. They started speaking more freely, helping one another without waiting for permission. Jordan offered a chair to an elderly couple. Mia greeted a nervous first-time buyer with genuine warmth. A junior rep spent extra time explaining financing to a young man who looked intimidated by the polished surroundings. There were no grand announcements, no motivational speeches, just a different kind of energy, quieter, truer. Later that afternoon, two sales associates shook hands after closing a deal together, smiling not just for commission, but for connection. Near the entrance, a couple left with their keys and a thank you that sounded sincere from both sides. For the first time in a long while, the dealership didn't feel like a stage. It felt like a place people belonged. The change hadn't come from a memo. It had walked in wearing dust-covered shoes and asked for nothing more than decency. And now, it was here to stay. Weeks passed, but something fundamental had shifted. The walls of the dealership still gleamed, and the same sleek cars sat under soft showroom lights. Yet the atmosphere no longer felt cold or rehearsed. Where tension once lingered, warmth now quietly settled in. Conversations flowed more naturally. Smiles, once guarded, now came easily, unforced and sincere. The staff moved with a sense of ownership, not obligation. Laughter occasionally echoed from behind desks. Customers lingered longer, not because they were pushed to, but because they felt seen. At the center of this change stood a new figure, Daniel, formerly the quiet assistant floor manager, now stepping into the role Rick once held. His promotion hadn't been announced with fanfare. It hadn't needed to be. Everyone already knew. He was the one they turned to when problems arose, the one who listened without judgment, who led not with pressure, but with presence. He didn't bark orders. He asked questions. He didn't watch for mistakes, he coached through them. The team responded not out of fear, but from mutual respect. When the CEO returned, the difference greeted him before a single word was exchanged. He walked through the glass doors to nods of recognition, not nervous shuffling. A receptionist smiled and said, "Welcome back, sir," without a trace of tension. The team gathered naturally, no need for stiff lines or whispered warnings. Decker walked the floor with quiet satisfaction. He watched as a new trainee took time, helping a young couple compare models, explaining features without pressure. Nearby, Mia guided a first-time buyer through financing options, her tone patient, her posture open. There was no performance in any of it, just care. Outside, the dealership's reputation had started to reflect the changes within. Online reviews shifted from complaints about cold treatment to praise for professionalism and kindness. New customers came in saying, "A friend recommended this place. They said it feels different." Word had spread, not from marketing campaigns, but from stories people wanted to share. In a brief staff meeting that afternoon, Daniel addressed the team. "We're still selling the same cars," he said. "But the way we treat people, that's what they remember. That's what they tell others. Let's keep giving them something worth talking about." There were nods all around. It wasn't just about meeting quotas anymore. It was about pride, about shared purpose. Decker said little during his visit. He didn't need to. His presence wasn't a test this time. It was a quiet endorsement. As he stepped outside, the sun caught on the polished windows behind him. He paused at the edge of the lot, hands in his pockets, taking in the scene. Customers moved easily between vehicles and staff. No one hovered. No one performed. It all just worked. A passing couple offered a wave. He returned it with a small nod. In the distance, a man in faded jeans crossed the street, pausing for a moment to admire a car through the window. One of the sales reps saw him, stepped forward, and opened the door. "Hey there," he said warmly. "Come on in. Take a look around." The man smiled and stepped inside. Decker turned away, a faint smile on his lips. Change hadn't come through orders or memos. It had arrived quietly, unnoticed at first, and grown into something lasting. And as the CEO stood outside, the dealership behind him alive with honest connection, it was clear. The era of fear was over. A new kind of leadership had taken root, and it looked a lot like respect. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from and drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.